Hi, my name is Max Fagin, and I'm an aerospace engineer from Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I'm a Space Camp alumni. I went to Space Camp in the summer of 2001 as a present for my grandparents. I was 13 years old, and like a lot of 13-year-olds, I absolutely loved everything about space. But also like a lot of 13-year-olds, I was still struggling a little bit with the concept of being a social creature. I wasn't very good at making friends at that age. So when I got off the bus at Huntsville, I kind of fell into the same mode of behavior as I'd adopt when I was at school. I didn't really try to talk with any of the other kids or learn anything about them. Instead, I just focused on all the things that I was getting to do and see. And I was totally okay with that because those things were really, really cool. Building model rockets, riding the centrifuges, touring the rocket park, all these things were exactly what I wanted Space Camp to be. But while I was enjoying it, definitely enjoying it, I wasn't exactly sharing the experience with any of my peers. And that did make it a little bit isolating. Well, that all came to a head during our first simulated mission when I was working with 3 other kids as mission specialists in the Space Shuttle simulator. I remember that I refused to let any of the other kids perform our assigned experiments because I was just so convinced that they would do it wrong. Well, after that, one of the instructors must have gotten pretty sick of my behavior, and quite rightfully so, because she took me aside and she told me something kind of profound. She told me that I wasn't at Space Camp to learn how to do things in space. I was at Space Camp to learn how to do things in space with other people, as part of a team. Well, that gave my ego a very much needed deflating, because it was very humbling to think that I had Space Camp completely figured out, but then only to be told that I had in fact missed the point entirely. So for the rest of the week, I tried harder to be a team player. I spoke to my roommates, I listened more during the group activities, I didn't insist that I knew the answer to every single question or the one right way to do every single challenge. And I think my instructors must have noticed, because the next time we simulated a mission, they picked me to serve as flight director in mission control. Being flight director was probably the most challenging thing I had to do during my time at Space Camp, because it was really the first time in my life when I was responsible for managing other people instead of just managing things. And that wasn't something that I had much experience with at the time. Well, after the simulation was over, I remember thinking back and realizing that I had made many of the exact same mistakes that I'd made on my first mission. I'd stepped on my teammates' toes, I'd ordered everybody around, I'd been much more of a micromanager than a flight director. But the difference was, I now recognized that those behaviors were mistakes on my part that I needed to correct. And thanks to the very serious deflating that my instructor had given me the day before, I started to take notice of things like that. Now, of course, Space Camp wasn't the first time that I'd had the importance of teamwork told to me. Nobody makes it to age 13 without hearing about how important teamwork is from books, from our parents, from our teachers, from movies, but Space Camp was really the first time that I can recall someone telling me not just that teamwork was important, but why it was important, and doing so in a way that an arrogant, stubborn 13-year-old could appreciate. It doesn't matter how driven or devoted or hardworking you think you might be. If you're not willing to work as a part of a team, you're not going to accomplish your goals. I've gone on to work for NASA, for SpaceX, for Made in Space. I've helped design hardware for high-altitude balloons, for sounding rockets, for the International Space Station. I've flown on the Weightless Wonder. I've been part of a crew at the Mars Desert Research Station. In general, I've continued on the same spaceward-bound trajectory that I was on since before I even got to Space Camp. But Space Camp was really the very first time that I can recall assimilating the importance of teamwork. And that's what I remember most 15 years later about Space Camp. It wasn't the model rockets, it wasn't the simulators or the centrifuges or the rocket park. What I really remember more than anything else is the lesson that if I'm not willing and able to work as an effective part of a team, then the mission is doomed before it even takes off.